So we looked at different ways to graph lines. One of them was by finding the intercepts. The intercepts are where the graph crosses both the x and the y axes. The x-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis. And because it's a point on the x-intercept is a point on the x-axis. To get to any point on the x-axis, you don't go up or down. You just go left or right. Because of that, the y value is 0. And that's how we find the x-intercept. So for question A, the x-intercept is where y equals 0. So you take the equation and you let y equals 0 and then solve for x. When y is 0, that y term essentially disappears because 2x plus 0 is just 2x. So you're going to have 2x on the left equaling positive 9 on the right, and then dividing by 2, x will be 4.5. That is the x-intercept. That we found that by letting y equals 0. So the coordinates of it will be 4.5, comma 0, which on the x-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4.5 is right there. Then the y-intercept will be where the graph crosses the y-axis. That is where x is 0. It's a point on the y-axis, so you don't go left or right to get there. Because of that, x is 0. So to find out what it is, you let x equal 0, and the x term will disappear. You'll get 2 times 0, which is 0, plus y minus 9. So again, 2 times 0 is 0. You're left with y on the left equaling 9 if you add the y to both sides. So this is the y-intercept. And again, we found it by letting x equals 0. Y worked out to be 9. So the y-intercept is at 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And so now we can draw the line going through those 2 points. And our lines always have arrows on the ends. There's that line. We graphed it by finding the x and y intercept. X-intercept of 4.5, that's 4.5 comma 0. Y-intercept of 9, that's 0 comma 9. So this is one way that we can graph lines, by finding the x and y intercepts. So for line B, again, the x-intercept is found by letting y equals 0. So that y term will just disappear. You're going to have 4x minus 0, which is just 4x. I'll add the 8 to both sides, and then divide by 4, which gives you 2. So the x-intercept is the point 2 comma 0. We found that x equals 2 when y is 0. So that's the point 2 comma 0. Now our y-intercept is where x is 0. So when you let x equal 0, that term again disappears. You're left with negative y minus 8 equals 0. Adding y to both sides, it'll become positive y on the right, and that will equal negative 8 on the left. We let x equal 0 to get that negative 8 value, so the y-intercept is at 0 comma negative 8, which is right there. So now we can draw our line going through those 2 points. Right, so there's that line. We found the x and y intercepts by letting y equal 0 for the x-intercept and x equals 0 for the y-intercept. Let's skip to question D. Again, the x-intercept is where y equals 0. So the y term will disappear. When you let y equal 0, 8 times 0 is 0. 3x take away 0 is just 3x. I'll add the 24 to both sides and then divide by 3, and x equals 8. This is the answer we got when y was 0. So that is the point 8, 0, which is right there. And now the y-intercept is where x equals 0. So again, if you let x equal 0, the x term will disappear. You'll be left with negative 8y minus 24 equals 0. If we add the 24 to both sides, it'll be positive on the other side. Then divide both sides by negative 8, and y will be negative 3. That is the point 0, negative 3. We let x equals 0 to find y equaling negative 3. And so we can draw the line going through those points. So there's that line. Again, we graphed it by finding the intercepts. Okay, let's look at line F now. So for line F, the equation says just x equals 4. So that means that no matter what y is, x will never change. X is always equal to 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. When y is 0, x is still 4. When y is 2, x is still 4. When y is negative 3, x is still 4. The equation says that x always equals 4. Y will change, but x doesn't. It's always equal to 4. So this is actually a vertical line. That's what it is. And again, we always put arrows on the end. So that is line F. Now, line G says that y equals 0. So that means that x can change, but y is always 0. When x is 1, y is 0. When x is 3, y is 0. When x is negative 2, Brooklyn, what does y equal? Y equals 0. The equation is y equals 0, which tells us that x can change, but y never does. This is actually a horizontal line. It's actually the equation of the x-axis. The x-axis is the equation y equals 0. Okay, looking at question H, 4x minus 12 equals 0. So this equation has x but not y. So we can get x by itself by adding 12 to both sides and then dividing both sides by 4. And you'll get x equals 3. So this is another one where x never changes. Y might change, but x is always 3. So when y is 1, x is 3. When y is negative 2, x is 3. When y is 0, x is 3. This is a vertical line. A vertical line. So this is one way that we learn to graph lines, by finding the intercepts. And as long as there's an x and a y in the equation, you can do that. But if there's only a x or only a y, you need to get that variable by itself, and that'll tell you what the equation looks like. Okay? The other way we looked at graphing lines, or one of the other ways, was using the slope and y-intercept. So we learned that y equals mx plus b is the slope-intercept form of a line. You need to have positive y by itself on one side, everything else on the other. Normally you'll have two terms on the other, a term that has an x and a term that doesn't, a constant. The term that tells you x tells you the slope, because m, the number in front of x, is the slope. B, the constant, is the y-intercept. It's where the graph crosses the y-axis. That's what the y-intercept is. It's where the graph crosses the y-axis. So if you have the equation in y equals mx plus b, then you can get the slope and y-intercept, and you can graph it from that. There we go. Okay, so the first one is in slope-intercept form because you have positive y by itself on one side, everything else on the other. M, the slope, is the number in front of x, which is -5. Our y-intercept would be at 0, 4. Because the constant is 4, that's the y-intercept. And remember, the y-intercept is always where x is 0. So that's why it's 0, 4. The second equation is in slope-intercept form. So m, our slope, is the number in front of x, which is 3/4. Our y-intercept is +1, which is always where x is 0, so it's the point 0, 1. What about the next one, Brock? Put your phone away. So that is in slope-intercept form because you have positive y by itself. In this case, there is no number in front of the x, which means it's +1. The slope is 1. And our y-intercept would be -7, which is the point 0, -7. The next equation has positive y by itself on one side. It has -4x, but there is no number after that. But that's the same thing as -4x plus 0. M, the slope, is -4. Here our y-intercept would be the point 0, 0. The y value is 0 because that's our b value, and x is always 0 on the y-axis. This next one is -3. This is the same thing as y equals 0x minus 3. M, the slope, is 0. This would be a flat line, a horizontal line. And b, the y-intercept, is -3, which is 0, -3. Question F is in slope-intercept form because you have y by itself. M, the slope, is a number in front of x. The y-intercept is at -1.25. 0, -1.25. Okay, let's skip on to the next page where we want to graph using the slope and y-intercept. So all of these are in slope-intercept form because you have positive y by itself. The first one, A, m, the slope, is 2. And when we're talking about graphing it, remember, slope is always rise over run. So we always wrote it as a fraction, 2/1. And our y-intercept is -3, so that's the point 0, -3. Again, it's where the graph crosses the y-axis. X is 0. You don't go left or right. You just go down 3 units. And that's where we start. We start at 0, -3. And then we apply our slope, which is +2/1. Rise 2 and run 1. And you can do that multiple times until you run out of room on the graph if you want. But you can also do this by going -2 over -1. Rise -2 and run -1. You can do that as well. That will work. So we can graph this line now. It's going to go through all those points. And we put arrows on the end to show that it continues on in that direction forever. So we graphed it using the slope and the y-intercept. So for question B, that is in slope-intercept form because you have positive y by itself on one side, everything else on the other. And the slope is -4, which is -4/1. Or you could also say 4 over -1. They both work. And our y-intercept is +8, which is the point 0, 8. So 0, 8 is up here. And in this case, we don't really have room to rise +4, but we can rise -4 and run +1. That's the same as -4. Rise -4 and run +1. And we got room to do that a few more times. Okay, and put arrows on the end. You with us, Chloe? Okay. Let's skip to question E. That is in slope-intercept form because y is, excuse me, by itself. And the slope's a number in front of x, which is -3/4. Our y-intercept is 2, which is the point 0, 2. And that's where we start. 0, 2 is our y-intercept. Our slope is -3/4, which you can write as -3/4 or 3 over -4. It doesn't matter. If you rise -3 though and run 4, you can go there. Rise -3 and run 4, you can go there. Or you can rise +3 and run -4. Rise +3 and run -4. Both of those work. So we can draw our line now. And we always have arrows on the ends because a line follows that same direction forever. Right? And question F, well, that would be the same as y equals 0x plus 5. That's one way to look at it. A slope of 0 and a y-intercept of +5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And a slope of 0 means it's perfectly flat. The other way of looking at this line is that x can change, but y doesn't. X can change, but y doesn't. Y is always 5. And that's what this line shows. X can change, but y always stays the same value. Okay, so we learned about, just make sure that's all of them. Yeah, we learned about general form. General form is ax plus by plus c equals 0. This is on the formula sheet, so you don't have to memorize it. So basically, you have everything on one side equal to 0 on the other, no fractions or decimals, and normally the x term is positive. So for question A, there's no fractions or decimals. You just have to bring the y over with the x by subtracting it. And that's the equation in general form. Everything on one side equal to 0 on the other, no fractions or decimal, x term positive. For question B, no fractions or decimals, but here the x term is negative. So you're going to take the two terms on the right and move them to the left. You're going to add x and subtract 8 from both sides. Now the equation is in general form. Question C, there's a fraction there, a denominator of 2. We get rid of that by multiplying every term by the common denominator. We're going to multiply every term by 2. So this is what I'm showing. Multiply every term by 2. And then what happens is that the 2's cancel for the x term. And you have 2y equals 3x plus 8. Then you just need to bring the 2y over. It'll be 3x minus 2y plus 8 equals 0. Now it's in general form. Okay. Question D has one denominator of 5, so you're going to multiply everything by 5. And the whole point of doing that is, in that middle term, the 5's are going to cancel. 5 divided by 5 is 1. They cancel. So you'll have 5y equals negative 3x minus 10. Now in this case, the x term is negative. We want it to be positive, so you're going to bring it over to the left side by adding 3x and adding 10 to both sides. Now it's in general form. Looking at question E, there's decimals there. So the x term has two numbers after the decimal. The constant term has only one. We need to multiply everything by 100 here. 100 has 2 zeros because the biggest decimal, if you want the one with the most numbers after the decimal, has 2 numbers after the decimal. So to make that one not be a decimal anymore, we have to multiply it by 100, which means we have to multiply all the terms by 100. So 0.25 times 100 will be 25x, minus 0.3 times 100 is 30, and then we'll bring the y term over. And there's the equation in general form. Question F, there are 2 denominators. So in this case, we'll multiply everything by the common denominator, which would be 8. 8y will equal negative 5 times 8 over 2 plus 1 times 8 over 8. So the reason this works is because 2 goes into 8 4 times, or 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 8 divided by 8 is 1. So by doing those divisions, you've gotten rid of the denominators. You have 8y equals negative 5 times 4, and I forgot to write the x there. Negative 5 times 4 is negative 20x plus 1 times 1. And now we'll bring the 20x over to the left by adding it to both sides and subtracting the 1 to bring it over as well. So there's the equation in general form. For number 3, it says determine the equation of each line using slope point form. The slope point form was y minus y1 equals m bracket x minus x1. So to do this, you take the point, 5 comma negative 2. That tells you what x1 and y1 are. You see, most equations have an x and a y in them. That's what the x and y are used for in this equation. X1 and y1 is our point, and m, our slope, is 6. So in this case, if we use point slope, it'll be y minus y1, which is negative 2, equals m, which is 6 bracket x minus x1, which is 5. That'll give us y plus 2 equals 6x minus 30. Because it does ask us to write in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. To do that, you'd have to subtract the 2 from both sides. So it'll give you 6x minus 32. So that's question A written in slope-intercept form. Question B. You've got the point -3, -5. Again, that's our values of x1 and y1. Here, our slope is -2. So using point slope, it's y minus y1 equals m bracket x minus x1. Minus minus becomes a plus positive. So that would be the equation in point slope form. To write it in slope-intercept form, we multiply out the brackets and then get y by itself by subtracting the 5 from both sides. Okay. Question C, let's do that. The point is -8, 3. So there's x1 and y1. Our slope is 1/2. So it'll be y minus 3 equals 1/2 bracket x minus 5. That's point slope form. If you multiply out the brackets, you're going to have 1/2 x minus 5 over 1 times 1 over 2 is 5/2. And then we're going to add 3 to both sides. To add the 3 and the 5/2 together, we need a common denominator of 2. So you're going to add 6/2. That's the same as 3. But it has a common denominator with the 5/2, so you can combine them. -5 plus 6 is positive 1/2. There's the equation in slope-intercept form. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to hand out a review sheet for you to work on. The answers are already on Google Classroom, so you can check your answers. I would strongly encourage you to do not only this one, but all the other ones that I've given you as well. It's going to help you get ready for your final exam, which, remember, is Monday, June 19th. This coming Monday at 8:30 in the morning. So you need to be here on Monday to write your final exam. Okay? I'm going to send out another email right away reminding everyone of that. Thank you.